Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Client's Conundrum by Cate Lawley, narrated by Rebecca Mitchell. Chapter 1. Where's the bathroom? The woman at the front of the room smiled in that bland, uninterested way that people do when they've given a presentation 15 times too many and didn't care whether you were listening or not. At least she had a pleasant voice. I know that some of you are new to the area, and some of you are new to enhanced living. Did she just look at me? I couldn't be the only newbie in the room. I shot a covert look around the room. 3 rows of people, each with 5 seats. And with only 2 empty seats, that meant 13 people in orientation. Nah. I couldn't be the only newbie. I've provided each of you with a binder. Inside the binder, you'll find... Pleasant or not, it all sounded like blah, blah, blah. This was going to be an ordeal. And to think I'd been looking forward to the Society's official orientation ever since I found out one existed. The thick binder in my hands was printed with the words, Property of the Society for the Study of Occult and Paranormal Phenomena. Do not remove from Society headquarters. Well, if you're going to give a girl, a vamp, a handbook, you better expect her to take it home. I wasn't sure how I'd lug 3 pounds of paper products and a massive 1990s-era binder out unnoticed, but I'd work it out. Just as the presenter was getting to the good part, the location of the several bathrooms scattered throughout the warehouse facility, someone's phone rang. Shame on them. A lady needed to know where the facilities were located. You never knew when you'd have a makeup emergency or a wardrobe failure. Because as many fluids as I drank these days, I never seemed to actually need to pee. The wonders of magic. The phone kept ringing. At some point, 3 rings later, 5, I realized I'd changed my ringtone to that exact same one. I dug through my purse, considered very briefly silencing the call, then answered, "Just 1 second." I started to crawl over the feet and purses of those unfortunate enough to be seated in my aisle. The Society had packed us in like sardines, which was silly with the number of people attending. Just give us a bigger room. "So sorry," I said to the woman whose foot I trode on. "Mallory?" I could just make out Gladys's voice on the phone, but I could hardly listen to her crawl over strangers in a tight space and make my apologies to the injured. Even though she was my first and only afterlife coaching client, Gladys would have to wait. Finally, I reached the end of the row and turned to give the presenter an apology wave, only to find her glaring at me. Oops. I waved and smiled anyway, then stepped out into the hall. "I'm so sorry, Gladys. It's just that I found a dead body in my bed." I closed my eyes and sighed. I checked that no one was in the hall before I said, "Did you say dead? Next to you? In bed? Calm down. I'm on my way." I ended the call with another sigh. Lord above, Gladys had turned into a project. She was probably having nightmares again. Although it had been a little while since she'd had one, so maybe... No, it had to be bad dreams. I headed toward the front of the warehouse building to the retail shop, Bits, Baubles, and Toadstools. It was the closest exit to the parking lot, and the stock in the store was always entertaining. I'd helped Gladys through a rough few days when she'd first transitioned. Like me, she'd been bitten and accidentally turned into a vampire. Our progenitor, a nasty creature who'd been hanged for his crimes, had been gorging on the blood of women he'd found particularly annoying. In the midst of all that, he'd killed several women, Not a society crime, but he'd also turned loose a few baby vamps on the world, and we'd been distinctly noticeable in our untrained dismay. Definitely a society crime. Gladys and I were the only survivors as far as I knew. The rest of the women he'd attacked had died. I had no memory of my particular neck-biting trauma, but Gladys remembered small pieces, and since then, men made her very uncomfortable. We'd been working on it. As her undead life coach, it was my job. Gladys might be my first client, but she seemed to be making great progress. My cell pinged with a new text message. As I slid my finger across the screen, a photo popped up. I flipped my phone to enlarge the picture. Yes, definitely a corpse. Definitely in a bed. Given our earlier conversation, most likely Gladys's bed. I started at a jog, considered how that corpse might have ended up there, then ran. As I sprinted to the front of the building, I couldn't help thinking, at least he was a man. The implied sexual nature of their relationship, naked and in her bed, so one could assume, was evidence of her improvement. Unless, of course, she had something to do with how he came to be no longer living. Nah. Either way, a dead body meant reinforcements were necessary. I made a beeline for my favorite investigator enforcer knight's office. Dead bodies usually meant all sorts of mess. Political mess, physical mess, maybe even magical mess. Alex was great with messes and highly unlikely to turn me away. He liked me. That, and we shared a sensitive secret. I arrived slightly out of breath at his office door. Whatever Alex might say about normal vamp behavior, I got out of breath when I ran. Knocking lightly produced no result, so I pounded. What? It sounded like Mr. Cranky Pants woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's Mallory. I opened the door to find a half-naked Alex rolling off the futon he used for emergency naps. A lot of very nice, very naked chest was on display. Surprisingly, that naked chest was covered in tattoos. Symbols, not pictures. And maybe letters? I hadn't a clue Alex was all tatted up. I leaned closer. What do you want? He snatched a t-shirt off the side table and pulled it over his head. I got a glimpse of his shoulders and back, also covered with the odd designs. And most interesting of all, the t-shirt covered every single bit of ink. No wonder I'd never noticed his ink. My client woke up next to a dead body. Any chance you could help a girl out? It said a lot about our relationship that he didn't look terribly surprised. I need 15 minutes. Perfect, I said, even though 15 minutes seemed like a terribly long time when a corpse was involved. You're a complete doll. He spared me a quick glare before disappearing into the bathroom. The door closed with a loud, firm click. I knew how important his sleep was to him. That was one half of the secret we shared. The spirits, or demons, or elementals, he hadn't really explained the difference, messed with him when he wasn't 100%. As a result, Alex was a bit of a health nut. How exactly they messed with him, I didn't know. We hadn't shared quite that much. Which led to the other half of the secret. Alex hadn't exactly shared that information. I'd seen one of the little nasties clinging to his back in the middle of the night. Apparently, sleep deprivation wasn't good for staving off the nasty critters. Alex cracked the door, and I could hear water running. Who's your client? I scrunched up my nose and hoped for the best. "Gladys Pepperman?" His groan was loud enough that I heard it over the running water. I waited, then let out a sigh of relief when he didn't say anything. Alex poked his head out of the bathroom. "Aren't you supposed to be in orientation?" I shrugged. "Did you even go?" "I went. I can even tell you where all of the bathrooms are." He stuck his head out again, but this time he was brushing his teeth, so he shot me an exasperated look. "So, you pee now?" "None of your business. A woman, vamp or otherwise, is allowed to retain a little mystery concerning personal habits." "That's a no, then." I shifted the large orientation binder from one arm to the other. "That's a no. Hey, I don't suppose theft of orientation materials is one of those crimes that leads to swift execution by hanging." Something clattered in the bathroom, and Alex swore. "You okay in there?" "Yes." And not long after, he exited looking brighter-eyed and wearing a small piece of toilet tissue on his jaw. "You will not be hung for stealing orientation materials. But bring them back. There's some sensitive information inside." And no witchy protection spells that do something nasty, like soak me in dye or make me smell funky, when I cross the headquarters threshold? No, but it's a thought if we keep getting Maid Society members like you. Like me? Maid versus born. Was that what he meant? Such a bizarre prejudice, but groups will hyper-focus on the differences. Alex was born, naturally. Or perhaps he wasn't referring to my maid status, but was simply commenting on my uniquely irreverent attitude. "Ready?" When I nodded, I chucked my keys at him. He had a thing about driving, so I let him. As the more flexible individual in the relationship, it seemed the right thing to do. And Alex's enhanced dexterity and speed meant he had mad driving skills. "Oh." I pulled up the picture on my phone as he locked his office. "This is the guy." He glanced at my phone, then closed his eyes. When he opened them, he snatched my phone and examined the picture more closely. "This is the CEO of the society." No. I knew that guy, and this wasn't that guy. Cornelius has a beard, and he's shorter, stockier. Cornelius is the chief security officer. This is the chief executive officer. Oh. I thought about it. Uh-oh. Alex ran his hand through his hair. Uh-oh is a massive understatement. Chapter 2. Dead men make icky herbs. I rolled over and he was just there. Dead. And naked. Gladys flashed big brown eyes at Alex. She really had gotten much better with men. Much more so than I'd known, if the dead body and now her interaction with Alex were any indication. "So you had—" I raised my eyebrows. "With Mr. Nuts. I'd forgotten to get the CEO's name." "I don't know his name, and I didn't have sex with him." Gladys seemed shocked. "I didn't know him." "Why was he in your house?" I asked. No delicate way to say it, really. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't know." I think Ms. Pepperman is trying to say that when she went to bed last night, alone, Mr. Dyson was not in her home. Is that right? Alex gave Gladys an encouraging smile. "Yes," she smiled back. "Yes, that's it. Well done." Alex had some strange power over women, even deeply traumatized ones, it seemed. I'd never asked him about it because we weren't that close, but I wondered if it was some special wizard effect. I was still a little fuzzy on what enhancements were typical for each group in the society's community. My temporary vamp roommate Wembley could be at turns quite expansive and very closed-mouthed, depending on his mood, the moon cycle, the weather, the clothes he was wearing, and who knew what other criteria. The men in my life were particularly mysterious since I'd vamped out a few weeks ago and joined the society. Okay, I understand. But I paused, wrestling with the delicate issue. Where exactly is Mr. Dyson now? I couldn't leave him on my good sheets. Absolutely, I agreed, thinking perhaps something had gone awry in the transformation process and fried a few of Gladys's brain cells. It wasn't the first time I'd had the thought. But where is he? I buried him in the backyard. It wasn't that she wasn't clever. Gladys was quite sharp. It was just that her reasoning sometimes took an unusual path. I tried to remember that as I continued to drag information out of her. I see. Do you remember where? A tiny wrinkle formed between her perfectly plucked eyebrows. Of course. How could I forget? Come outside and I'll show you. That would be helpful, I said. Alex and I followed Gladys outside. She pointed to a perfectly groomed bed, edged out with large stones. Inside the bed were newly planted herbs. Those two are mint, and that's lavender, lemon balm, rosemary, basil, and parsley. You planted an herb garden, a fragrant and very edible garden. I spotted several neatly stacked plastic pots, the kind that plants came in from the nursery. On top of Mr. Dyson. Alex rubbed his face. Gladys. I touched his arm. You did all of that in between calling me and when we arrived? No, that wouldn't be possible, would it? Now she looked at me like I was the one short a few marbles. I already had the plants from a few days ago. I've been planning this garden for weeks now, since before... You know. Anyway, I had the plants and mulch, and then there was the body. Right. And your sheets, I said. Exactly. But I definitely buried him before I called you. Why do you think I sent you a photo? Again, she wasn't an idiot. Merely an original thinker. I'm not sure. Why don't you tell us? I glanced at Alex to make sure he was keeping mum. I was quite proud of myself for demonstrating restraint. He'd have kicked me in the shin if our roles were reversed. The picture is to identify the victim. You can't solve the crime without knowing who the victim is, can you? I heard all about how you found our progenitor, so you're basically like a detective. Gladys cocked her head. It was more accurate to say I was on the bad guy's trail when he found me, but who was I to quibble? Gladys thought I was a sleuth, and that was a teensy-weensy bit flattering. Okay, so you get that we have to dig him up now, right? I was trying to be gentle, trying not to point out the absolute lunacy of her actions, but once again she was looking at me like I just didn't get it. Wait a second. Alex considered the bed, the yard, the surrounding area. Any chance your neighbors heard you doing anything unusual? If he was thinking about jumping on board with Gladys's wacky plan, I might have to reassess his sanity. I don't think so. I was really careful, and very quiet. Alex indicated the 6-foot fence. No 2-story houses, privacy fencing all around, large yards. It's possible no one saw anything. I glared at him and pointed to the pretty herb garden. Dead body. Just a second, Gladys. He pulled me away from Dyson's slowly rotting corpse and Gladys. He leaned close, speaking quietly. Yes, it was an insane thing to do, but it's done, and he's the CEO of the society. You do realize how important he is in local politics, right? Your client admits to being in bed with his corpse, is known to have violent reactions to men, and covered up the crime. I get that it looks bad, but there's no way Gladys did this. And if she did, she'd have told me. It's not like she's holding back now. And she's much better with men. I poked him in the chest. Obviously. It's not my fault that I'm woman crack. Okay, that's clearly not true. But whatever it is you have, is really annoying. I blew out a breath, considering his proposal. You think the society will crucify her? Don't you? I looked at Gladys, now inspecting her nails, calm as you please. She was probably looking for grave dirt. She hauled that body out here all by herself. I shook my head. But yes, I do think they'd hang her in a heartbeat, assuming that killing people within the society is actually a crime? Yes, murder of a society member can be a crime. The occasional escalating feud is overlooked, but not the murder of a political figure. Alex eyed me. You know most vamps aren't quite as wimpy as you. Say that when I have my magic sword with me, Buster. Tang Whistle was a personality-filled living sword with a bloodthirsty streak, a gift of a sort from my roommate, and I was sure once I learned how to use a sword, I would be a kick-butt ninja sword-wielding vamp. I sniffed. That really was neither here nor there. And I couldn't believe it, but I was considering this completely harebrained scheme. All right, let's say we do this. What's the next step? Well, I do have a place in mind where we can stash him, but I need to check on that. Until then, if there was a wall near, I'd be banging my head on it. It looked like Dyson was going to be herb garden food. All right. For now, he stays. And then? We make sure that someone notices Dyson has disappeared. Shouldn't be hard. The guy is a workaholic. Alex grinned. Then we get Cornelius to hire us to find him. I laughed, but with a note of hysteria. We perpetuate the myth of his disappearance, then get paid to find him? You see no moral quandary with that? Not to mention that Cornelius will likely pluck our eyelashes bald if he catches a whiff of what's actually happening. He's more likely to have some toenails removed. But it's that, or throw Gladys to the wolves. He tipped his head in her direction. Deception is less of a moral quandary when you consider the alternatives. Gladys was merrily adding potting soil to her newly made bed. No thoughts of swinging from a noose had entered her head. Not that I could tell. Ugh. All right, fine. But we have to find some way to convince Gladys to keep her mouth shut. Alex and I turned back to Gladys. I couldn't help eyeing the herbs with misgiving. Enhanced dead guy composing and feeding their hungry little roots. Ick. I whispered to Alex. What kind of enhanced being was Dyson? Gollum. I shook my head. Sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember the particulars. They're made. Created from dead flesh of unenhanced humans. That's right. Now I remembered and wasn't surprised I'd mentally blocked out those particular details. Double ick. Wembley said they tended to be pretty good-looking because the mom and dad could pick and choose the parts. Triple ick. As we approached, Gladys patted into place the last little bit of soil she'd added. Isn't it nice? I'd been wanting one for a long time. Gladys had been recently divorced when she was turned. She'd finally escaped a controlling relationship with a type A, overachieving, critical spouse, but not weeks later was drugged, bitten, and unwillingly transformed into a vamp. She'd gone through a lot. Knowing that made it easier to deal with her particular quirks. I thought the mint would be nice for mojitos, and I hear that blood tastes heavenly with a small quantity of basil, parsley, and rosemary crushed and added right before you drink it. I swallowed and tried not to Ralph on the spot. Oh, I'm sorry. Gladys gave me a concerned look. I forgot about your phobia. I shouldn't mention blood when you're around, should I? She whispered blood, as if lowering her voice made the word less offensive. Right, because it was the mention of blood and not the herbs grown in a decomposing golem man that was freaking me out. Actually, she wasn't wrong. The blood part was gross, too. But I dredged up a smile. Not a phobia, more a strong dislike. And, yay, no more projectile vomiting. I've got that totally under control. But about... I tipped my head in the direction of the herb garden, a.k.a. Dyson's resting place. If Alex and I are going to be able to investigate, we need you to keep a low profile and forget everything that's happened with Dyson. For now, Alex said. Who's Dyson? She smiled innocently at me. Then she plucked a sprig off one of the plants and offered it to me. Mint? She had the composure of an amazing liar, which was a little nutty given the situation. Or brilliant. I couldn't figure out which. Chapter 3. Orientation O, Mallory 1. I got in the passenger seat of my Grand Cherokee. I wasn't sure why we were in my car, other than I'd offered, although I supposed Gladys had technically been my client. But not anymore. What's the grin for? Alex asked. Just happy to share the Gladys burden. She's exhausting. Isn't she your first client? Your only client? I gave him my mean, squinty look, which appeared to have no impact. That doesn't mean she's any less difficult. Just saying, without some comparisons... Never mind. From the route we were taking, I guessed we were headed to the Society's headquarters. Are we off to have a chat with Cornelius? You're going back to orientation. I'm going to discreetly inquire as to Dyson's schedule for the day. Someone will notice his absence. He's an important, busy guy, and I'd like to have some idea when that's going to happen. Maybe nudged along if he's not missed soon. Alex looked me over head to foot. Where's your orientation manual? Since I wasn't sure, I did a quick look around, then remembered stashing it in the back. Back seat? Uh-huh. Don't lose it. I won't. I tried to sound annoyed by the very idea, but since I'd actually forgotten where the thing was, I might have failed. So, what are the chances Cornelius will actually hire us if Dyson's disappearance goes public? It was always good to be prepared when dealing with Cornelius. He was a stinker, a former despot, or so I suspected, turned bureaucrat. Exceptional. Cornelius trusts me. That didn't seem particularly clever of the guy, since Alex had no problems lying to his boss. But I figured that refraining from comment was wisest. And I was pretty proud of myself. I was starting to think a little before I spoke. A big improvement for me. My transformation to vamp really had done a number on my impulse control. Can you give me some context for Dyson's role in the society? I asked. I get that his title was CEO, but in terms of the enhanced community, what role did he play? Alex considered the question, or he was hyper-focused on his driving. Eventually, he said, "A small city or a large town mayor, if you consider the enhanced population in Austin alone is around 10,000, and he covers the whole state. So yeah, a lot like a mayor." And if he's such a workaholic, why have I never seen him? I asked, because I was no stranger to the Society's headquarters.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?